Hello, thanks for watching. Subscribe down below if you're enjoying. And in this video I'm going to take you through how I painted my Escher gang for Necromunda. So I'm walking the line here between a grim, dark, dirty Underhive colour scheme and a vibrant Warrior Women colour scheme as well. So a few things I'm going to do there to hopefully walk that line. Now I've started off with a black undercoat, then on top of that a leadbelcher spray, so a metallic spray. I think that works really well because we are in a industrial futuristic setting. There's lots of spikes and straps and things that this will be massively time saving for as well, so kind of two reasons. Now we're starting off with a dark brown, and I'm using that on all the chaps, the straps, the belts, you know, the leather jacket the leader wears, those kind of things, and then the clothing on top where the armour kind of attaches to. One thing I'd say on this is avoid covering any spikes, belt buckles, bits of armour, because you want the effect of the metal to show through, and it'll save you a massive amount of time. If you go covering all the spikes now by being a little bit rushed, you know, you're going to use more work later to kind of touch back up. Now the next two colours I've just skipped past, and that is a light brown and a purple. The light brown is for all the animal pelts that the Escher have. They're renowned for raising these animals and using them fighting and then keeping the pelts after. So all those pelts that are on them, you know, it's a cloth. And the purple is just for the under trousers. Not a lot of that showing, but just the trousers underneath where the chaps are. We've gone for a purple colour, and that'll tie into some of the hair colours we're using later. Now the armour for me is the key part of representing the Underhive dirt versus vibrancy. Now I've gone for a bright green colour. Any bright colour will do that you fancy tying your gang together with. And when putting it on, I'm not painting this on as such, but I'm also not stippling. I'm kind of going somewhere in between. So I'm just using the very end of the brush, and I'm just tapping the paint onto the armour. Being careful to leave some of that metal showing through, because what I want these armour panels to look like is bashed, battered armour. Kind of represents where they're at, but also represents the ideals of the Escher, because they're trying to be bright and colourful, but they're in a rather horrible place to do that, so we're going a bit of bashed effect. Now when you're doing it, try leave the metal showing either on the raised areas that are going to get a lot of contact as they slam against bulkheads or whatever, or the areas around the cloth where the cloth might have rubbed this paint off. You can leave as much or as little of the metal showing as you want, depending on how battered you want the armour. Now what I did, the leader's equipment is looking in slightly better condition than the gangers and the juves, because obviously it reflects her importance in the gang and how she would hopefully be able to maintain her equipment a little bit better. But you can leave as much or as little showing through as you want, depending how you want your gang's metal to show. I've not used the green on anything other than armour, except on the leader and the specialist, and then just on the gun cowlings on the model. So I've not put a massive amount of this colour on, just enough to let it pop. So some knee panels and things as well. So we're not slathering the whole model in it. Now moving on to brass colour. So I'm using retributive armour. Now this is to sort of lift the standard of the weaponry to make it look just so it's like it's flat. But I'm also using it on the gas canister nozzly thing that attaches to every belt. So I've painted that on everybody. I've picked out some other details on the weaponry, and I've used more of it on the leader and the specialist's weapons than I have on the standard gangers. Some gangers I've not used any of this on the weaponry at all, and I've just picked out, you know, if they're wearing like a collar or they've got, you know, pierced eyebrows that these guys have. So not used a huge amount of this across the models, but this is just to add a little bit of visual difference. And again, it can add that difference to the leader because I've used quite a lot, you know, on the whip thing on the end of things, and the juves not so much. And again, it differentiates their status in the gang, but also ties it all together because every model's got some of it on. Now onto the skin. Because my intention is to have every gang in Necromunda, and I've got quite a few already, I want to use the skin colour as a way of, again, tying a gang together. So I've chosen to do this entire gang with kind of a pale skin. So it's a flat flesh colour I'm using. You could do it with all brown skin. You could do a mix, which I've done on some other gangs. But I've used this because, again, I find, personally, pale flesh easier to make look dirty. I find dark flesh easier to make look, you know, pristine and a bit more impactful. So that's my personal preference. You could do that mix, but I'm going for right across the gang. One thing to mention at this point, I suppose, as well, is the bases. You can see I've not used the standard bases that come with them. What I've done is a Green Stuff World roller on top of some milliput. I've got other videos where I discuss how to use those, so you can have a hunt and check them out. I do some little bits of painting onto the bases, so a little bit of yellow into some of the hazard marking, but pretty much it's just left that basic silver. And again, this is another way I'll tie the entire gang together, because no matter what gang I'm going to do, I'll do the bases exactly the same. So even the gangs that I might paint pristine and clean will be on the same style basis, so it ties my whole collection together whilst allowing me to make the gangs look sort of visually different. So it's just something else to talk about. You can see here when I'm painting the skin particularly, I'm moving around and getting all the angles and turning the model upside down, and because skin's one of those areas that if you miss something underneath, it really stands out. Most of the rest of this colour scheme, if you were to miss something, especially in an area underneath the model, the silver spray that's on there, when the ink wash that we're going to do later goes onto it, you won't really notice that you've missed something because it'll be tied in with that silver industrial style. The flesh is one that you won't get away with it if you miss something and you have that silver showing through. So just something to watch and be aware of. Now I'm using a bleached bone colour, and I'm just picking the bones, kind of what it's for in the name, and also the feathers across the model. Now there is an argument to say you need to do all the feathers all different colours, and that's part of the Escher ethos, but for me, having the feathers in a pale colour, one stands out because it's on a grim darky model, so it adds a bit of visual difference with the gangs, but also it ties them together if you use the same colour. I didn't want to have all the feathers all different colours because for me then it'll start getting a bit clashing, a bit garish, and I'm wanting to try and have a fairly tied together gang but with some points of visual difference that you will see as you look closer to the model. And for me personally, loads of bright feathers would have clashed a bit too much, but that's just my personal preference. Now onto the hair. You see there I've put 3 different colours down, so I'm using a genestealer purple, a scream of pink and a pale blue. And I'm not doing every model with the same hair, but I'm also not doing every model with wildly different hair. I'm using it where I'm using the purple on the gang leader and the second in charge because it's that kind of royal colour. Purple's the colour of leadership. It's quite a bright, vibrant purple as well. Then I'm going to use the scream of pink on a few different gangers, and then the blue on some other gangers, and then there's gangers where you've got 3 different hair colours with the top knots and whatever, and I'm going to use all 3. What that enables me to do is the different sculpts, and so you've got different heads on the same bodies obviously, but you can then put red hair on one, blue hair on another. It helps separate them apart, and you can put the multiple hair colours on the other models. So just another way of making the models look different. Remember, these are the same sculpt used multiple times, so it helps you make them look a bit different, but it also helps tie the gang together that these colours are replicated across the gang. Now the animal pelt. As I said before, I want to be fairly consistent, but I do want these pelts to look a bit different between models. I'm not going to do any different colours, so the colours are going to be that pale brown that we've used and the black for the detailing, but there's 2 different ways here I'm going to show how I've done the skins. The first one is very simple. It literally is as simple as you're drawing a black line. So the lines are a couple of mil long, maybe a mil thick on this first one, and I've done about 14 lines across, working down the side, working across space, and just literally putting black lines on, trying to keep them separate from each other by maybe a mil or 2 across the model. I've done another one in the same technique, but with lines that are twice as thick, and I've used half as many on the cloth. So that gives similar effect. Looks like a similar animal, but slightly different. On the leader and a couple of the models, another way of doing the pelts to try and make it look different is literally drawing a letter C. So working down the right-hand side of the cloth to start with, using a very fine brush, not a lot of paint on there, and I'm literally drawing the letter C on the model, and then I'm moving slightly to the left and using the lines that I've already drawn to draw further letter C's, again spacing them out across the model. I think on this pelt I've used about 12 letter C's across, and hopefully you'll see at the end how that will look, and it looks sort of like a real animal pelt, ties it together. Here we go. Now here's the stage. This is my favourite wash. This is a Vallejo sepia wash. It's a dirty looking wash. Any sepia coloured wash will do. Don't use a bright, sort of slight fleshy coloured wash that will give a red effect. We want this to be the layer that ties in all the dirt, all the grime, and puts that bit of grim dark shading into your model for you. You don't have to do this wash layer. You could skip this part, keep the models as they are, and then do some highlighting that I'm going to show later. But I like it. I like the dirty old models, and I particularly like this wash. You'll see what effect that gives. You could stop here again. We don't have to bring these models back up and put that vibrancy back in. You could leave them. It would be a nice, dirty, muted gang, and that would look absolutely fine. You can see here on all the different models, the things I've been talking about before, the different hair, the different armour, and everyone will carry on. So all we're doing now is the same colours we've already used, and we're going back over them all, because the colours you've used now have been muted down with the wash that's gone over them. So when you put these colours back on, even though they're the same, it looks like a highlight layer. Now we're not painting every single part that you've already painted. Looking to cover approximately 50% of what you've already done. So when you're working on the leather here, for example, avoid any straps and spikes and things that are coming out that are still the metal colour, and aim for the areas that the kind of light would hit. So if there's a stud sticking out of the leg, don't paint anywhere near the stud, kind of paint in between those studs, and then you'll get that three-tone effect. You know, the real dark wash in the cracks and crevices, moving up to the flat areas where the wash is still showing, but it's not quite so dark, and then the highlight there you'll put on. And do that on all the colours, even the hair. You know, the hair's moulded, there's some quite deep recesses, so go for the raised areas when you're putting that paint on. Now the important bit, the bit that adds the pop to the gang, going into the green, exactly the same technique as you did before. You're not paint brushing it on, you are just kind of tapping it on with the end of the brush. And what we're looking for is any areas that are green, we're looking for probably 50% of it being covered. So again, you'll see the battered armour, the lighter, the sort of darker green where the wash has gone, and then the light. And that works on all the colours, exactly the same technique we're looking for. And hopefully you'll see here what this is now, the, you know, finalised effect. It's particularly clear with the leader because we haven't touched that whip at all, we've just left it the basic metal. And on every model I'll show you here, you can see hopefully, you know, what we've done with the animal pelts, the battered armour effect, the different coloured hair they've all got. But every model does look slightly different, whether that be the hair colour, the amount of battle damage, the pelt style we've done in painting. And it's all fairly simple, basic techniques, but I think gives a really effective final finish. Now what we've not talked about is I've done some little bits of very faint pink and red, you know, to put on the lips to make it a little bit more interesting on the flesh. I've painted some grenades in green, but basically everything you've seen is there. Simple, basic, easy techniques to make, hopefully, a good balance between grimdark and vibrant warrior. So I hope you've enjoyed. Like and comment and all that jazz, and I'll see you next time.